All right, friends, you are watching the webcast for NG2. We are currently in a hold at about the L-20-minute mark. And I got an update for you guys. We're waiting on weather. You might be looking at that and be like, the weather looks pretty good, Tab. And I'd be like, you're right. It's looking a lot better, huh? Well, we're also chasing some boats out of the way.
The boats!
There are some boats that are essentially being told, hey, you're in our flight path. You got to get out of here. They should have known that to begin with. But that's just one of the other things that you deal with when you deal with rocket launches.
Tabitha, I'm gonna try to see the silver lining in this, or I'm gonna try to be the ever optimist that I am. Last time we had this launch, we also had an errant boat in our in our flight path, and we had a pretty spectacular launch. And we put our payload, got to orbit, we filled our objective. So I'm going to call this a good luck omen.
A good luck. You know, speaking of good luck omens, yesterday, me, you, and our very own Eddie Safert, we were headed out to the launch pad, and we saw a tortoise crossing the road. And if you didn't know, tortoises are a part of our coat of arms, and we find them as a sign of good luck. So, Eddie, you are out there. You are with employees. You're at the best spot to see the rocket launch. But let's talk about something serious for a second. Let's talk about how hard it is to land the booster. For those of you who don't know, you probably do know if you're watching this webcast, on our first attempt, we weren't able to land the booster, but we were able to get our payload into orbit. Today, our big objective, aside from getting our payload into orbit, which is ESCAPADE, is we want to land our booster. No, never tell me the odds, and I like the name of that booster, so I want to keep it. So, Eddie, how hard is that?
Well, so first off, thank you for your patience. The weather here is looking a little better. The boats, as Ariane said last time, definitely safety is our highest priority. And the tortoise, for me, a sign of good luck. I mean, I think it's just a trifecta of signs that we're ready to not just launch ESCAPADE to space successfully, but to land this booster. So we learned a lot. Nothing substitutes flight data. So the GS1 booster, after it separates from the GS2 upper stage, it does a 180-degree flip maneuver so that the aft section is facing backwards, or basically back down to Earth, but in the flight path. And so that 180-degree maneuver is conducted by our reaction control system. They're peroxide monothrusters. We call them the severe weather agility thrusters. And those worked perfectly last time. We did the maneuver. And then the BE4 engine goes for a reignition. So the three center engines reignite what we call the exo-atmospheric reentry burn. And its entire purpose is to slow down the GS1 as it reenters the atmosphere so that its superior aerodynamic performance, those long strakes, those forward fins, can guide the GS1 booster over the Jacqueline.
Yeah, Eddie, thank you for such a good explanation for our viewers at home, because it took a little bit for me to understand, too, exactly. I'm like, why is it so difficult? And it's like, Tabitha, it's pretty difficult. And I'm like, yeah, it's like when you watch the Olympics and you watch someone run fast, you're like, oh, I can do that. It's like, no, you can't. It's actually quite difficult. So, thank you, Eddie, for that great explanation. Again, we are currently in a hold. You are watching NG2, our webcast here. We are at about L-20 minutes. We're going to toss it right back over to the rocket. New Glenn is on the pad. It is feeling cool. It is looking cool. And it is literally, Ariane, very cool right now. right, friends, you are watching the webcast for NG2 right now. You can see New Glenn out there on the pad. But an important part of what's happening today with New Glenn is we are sending ESCAPADE to Mars. And I got the extreme privilege, the honor, if you will, to talk to the principal investigator of ESCAPADE, Dr. Rob Lillis. Check it out. Rob, for someone who doesn't know, what does the principal investigator of ESCAPADE do?
So the principal investigator is entrusted by NASA to execute the entire project. So it's kind of like the buck stops with me. I have a team of excellent people around me, but I'm responsible for the production of the data, the definition of the science requirements, the execution, the technical aspect of the mission. I think it's a great model for how NASA sort of entrusts the completion, the execution of a mission to a partner like UC Berkeley, where I'm based.
And ESCAPADE is a really special project. We are so excited to be taking it up today on NG2. Tell me a little bit about what ESCAPADE does.
So ESCAPADE is a twin spacecraft mission going to Mars, orbiting Mars to sample the ways in which Mars and its upper atmosphere respond to changes in space weather. By space weather, I mean the million-mile-per-hour stream of charged particles that the sun is at all times throwing out. Sometimes that stream gets gusty, and the gustiness, essentially, of it is what we call space weather. And there's all sorts of ways that can happen. The magnetic field can get stronger, the speed can get higher, the density can get higher, and all those things have an effect on the Martian atmosphere. And over time, it can strip away the particles in the upper atmosphere. And we know that this has been an important process by which Mars's climate has changed over Martian history. Early in Mars history, up to about 2 billion years ago, Mars was at least occasionally warm and wet. It had a thick atmosphere. It was habitable. We don't know whether life actually existed, but it was habitable there. But then in the last 2 billion years, it's lost most of its atmosphere. And we think that the stripping of the atmosphere by the solar wind is a big reason why that happened. And ESCAPADE is going to be sampling and investigating these processes with a stereo perspective with 2 spacecraft. And that's really important because up until now, with one single spacecraft, we've only been able to measure either the solar wind itself or the effect of the solar wind closer to the planet. We've either had the cause or the effect, but separately. With ESCAPADE, we can have 2 spacecraft simultaneously cause and effect at the same time. And so that's the breakthrough that ESCAPADE is going to provide us in understanding the processes by which the atmosphere is stripped away.
And once we understand that, I mean, how does that affect us here back on Earth or future Mars missions?
Right. So it's important for a couple of reasons. One, I think we're just curious as to how planets evolve in general. Like over the billions of years, planets, they change their atmospheric composition. They're more volcanically active, and that can affect the atmosphere too. And so this is an important piece, isn't the only piece, of course, but it's an important piece of the puzzle of Mars climate evolution. And that's interesting just because we love to explore as humans. But it's also important because space weather can have a practical effect on robotic spacecraft that we send to Mars future and also humans when they explore Mars. This is important for a couple of different reasons. One, a big space weather event, what's often called an interplanetary shock or a coronal mass ejection, when the sun belches out a couple billion tons of hot plasma, often at high speed, high density. As that shock expands through the solar system, it accelerates particles to really high energies that they can go right through a spacesuit and cause astronaut health problems.
Right.
And so the radiation on the surface of Mars, when you get a big enough coronal mass ejection, you can get 100 days worth of radiation in one day. This happened last year.
Wow.
This happened last year, June 6th, 2024. The usual background level of radiation was increased by a factor of 100 for that day when that happened. And so if you're an astronaut on the surface of Mars, you don't want to be out away from your radiation shelter when that happens. And so ESCAPADE's measurements are going to enable us to better forecast those radiation hazards. There's another reason too why ESCAPADE's important, because we're also going to be studying the ionosphere. So this is a layer of gas in the upper atmosphere that's ionized. And that's important because that layer, it distorts radio signals as they pass through it. And understanding the variability and the structure of that ionosphere will help us to correct for those distortions.
For communication.
Communication, but also for navigation, because there's going to want to be GPS on Mars eventually. And understanding how the ionosphere distorts the GPS signals will enable astronauts to know better where they are. All these things are taken into account on Earth. It's all behind the scenes. So your phone doesn't have to show you how they're correcting for it, but that's all behind the scenes on Earth. we want to be able to do that same error correction on Mars, and ESCAPADE will help us understand the ionosphere.
It's really cool to know that we're thinking about these future problems now.
Yeah.
And speaking of things that are happening in the future, I mean, ESCAPADE is not going to be making it actually to Mars. The
Right.
spacecrafts aren't going to be there for at least 2027.
That's right indeed, yeah.
So what happens once ESCAPADE deploys?
Yeah.
Kind of tell me more about the trajectory.
Okay, well, so after it deploys, first of all, there's a few important checkouts we have to do. The first thing is we got to deploy the solar panels and we got to get it to speak to us. And so actually, the viewers will be interested to know that we may not hear from the spacecraft for up to 3 hours after launch. And that is by design.
Okay.
Because we have 2 antennas, one on either side of the spacecraft, and they only work one at a time. And we don't know which one necessarily is going to be pointed towards Earth initially. So if the one that turns on first happens to be pointed away from Earth, we got to wait 2 hours until it decides, oh, I'm not hearing from Earth, and it switches over to the other one. So no one should panic if we don't hear from it within that first hour. But once we know that we have signal, we're hearing from it, and we know the solar panels are deployed and they're facing the sun, so that's called power positive, so it's a safe and a stable mode, then we can relax, and then we can start focusing on the longer term aspects of the mission. And you mentioned trajectory. So yes, we are taking quite an unusual path to Mars. We are going to spend about a year in a very large Earth orbit, fairly gravitationally bound to the Earth. We're calling this the loitering phase. It's in the shape of a kidney bean. It kind of goes like this. And next November 2026, we're going to come back to Earth after going more than 2 million miles away. We're going to come back to only 600 kilometers above the surface. We're going to use Earth's gravity and burn our engines at that point, taking advantage of Earth's gravity to slingshot ourselves toward Mars. Because early November next year is when the interplanetary window opens for a transit from Earth to Mars. So all Mars missions before us have had to wait until this narrow 3 or 4 week window every 25 months. We're launching halfway between these two windows, so we're just going to kind of hang out in near Earth space until it's time to go to Mars. And this has never been done before. And this is really, really exciting because this actually opens up the possibility in the future. If humans want to actually settle Mars, we're going to have to send hundreds, maybe even thousands of ships to Mars within that 2 or 3 or 4 week window. And there aren't enough launch pads on Earth to reliably do that just within that window. So we could launch them over the course of a whole year, maybe, and we could like sort of queue them up,
right,
so that they're kind of lined up so they can go when that window opens. And so this is hopefully going to pioneer a way to essentially enable interplanetary settlement in the distant future. Who knows?
And once the mission actually starts, how long is the mission going to be going on?
So, so I mentioned November 2026. That's when we start our interplanetary cruise. We spend 10 months in that cruise to Mars, doing little trajectory correction maneuvers all the time, little tiny engine burns to like just, barely tweak our path so that we can intercept Mars in early September 2027. And that's when we got to do another big engine burn to be captured by Mars's gravity. And that's when we will be in Mars orbit. Then we spend another 7-8 months-ish adjusting the orbits.
Wow.
So first of all, lowering the orbits, then adjusting the orbits. And this is important because ESCAPADE is doing another thing that's never been done before, which is the first ever formation flying around another planet, other than the Earth or
a lot of firsts on this
the
one.
Moon. It's kind of like pearls on a string. Both spacecraft have to get into the same orbit. And it takes a while to adjust both orbits to make that happen. And also in the middle of that, there's what we call solar conjunction, where the sun gets in the way between Earth and Mars, and we can't talk to it for a whole month. So we kind of just have to chill out, go into safe mode, and just wait. And so this is the reason why it's going to take us an additional 7 months after we get to Mars before we can start the science mission in spring 2028. And then we have an 11-month science mission, and that's also in...
So this is going to take us all the way into 2029.
Yes, exactly, yeah. It's, I think, May 2029 is the nominal end of the science mission. And I mentioned the 2 spacecraft are going to be the pearls on a string. We do that for the first 6 months. And that's important because we want to know how the upper atmosphere of Mars is changing minute to minute. So in the past, with only single orbiter missions, we've had to wait 4 or 5 hours to see how things have changed. And by that point, the planet's turned a quarter rotation, things are different. We don't know how anything changes on short timescales at all on Mars. ESCAPADE is going to pass through the same part of the upper atmosphere twice in a quick succession, so 2 minutes to 30 minutes apart, to see how it changes on those short time scales. Once we're done with that, then we raise one orbit, we lower the other orbit, and then the two orbits are different, and they start precessing. This is a word for the orbital planes moving with respect to each other.
Okay.
And this allows the two spacecraft to get much further apart from each other to make those simultaneous cause and effect measurements that I mentioned earlier, to understand the real-time response of the upper atmosphere to the space weather events.
And so, with all that, understanding how ESCAPADE works, and knowing that this mission is going into 2029, how do you feel today?
I feel excited. I feel a little anxious, as everyone does on launch day, but I am super, super excited. I'm proud of everyone who worked on ESCAPADE, at Blue Origin, at Rocket Lab, at Berkeley, at Embry-Riddle, all of our partners. Advanced Space LLC, they were the ones who did most of the work to design this innovative path to Mars as well. And so I'm just so proud of the whole team. Probably thousands of people have worked on bits of it up to this point. And we're so excited to reach this day, the culmination of so much effort and the beginning of the next chapter.
And the last question I have for you is something I ask everyone, and that is there anything else you want to add or say or mention that I didn't ask about that you think is important to this interview?
So ESCAPADE is a very low-cost mission. ESCAPADE is only about 1/10 of the typical cost of a NASA planetary mission. This is a radical experiment by NASA in seeing whether they can accept slightly higher risk and less oversight in exchange for a much lower cost. And the idea being that overall you get way more science per dollar if you do this. And
We call it bang for your buck.
bang for your buck, science for your dollar, and it's because we are embracing, as I said, a lighter sort of a touch by NASA. We're using more commercial off-the-shelf parts. There are fewer reviews. There are fewer sort of requirements. NASA's kind of letting us run a little more than they would typically.
Okay.
And NASA's oversight is often what drives a lot of cost. That's great, but it does come at a cost. And so this is hopefully a new way of doing at least a fraction of NASA's science portfolio with this higher risk, lower cost approach.
It's very exciting to have you here, to be able to interview you.
This is an exceptional sight. Just watching pieces of other rockets being put together, and knowing that our booster, our upper stage,
It was all built right here.
it was all built right here. The fairings, the
Yeah.
payload adapter, it was all built right here. Yeah.
Well, Rob, thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Cheers. Bye bye.
So obviously a great interview and a great opportunity to be able to talk to Dr. Rob Lillis there. If you were just joining us, you are watching the webcast for NG2. If you're looking at your screen, you might notice we have a new L time, which is L minus 28 minutes and about 30 seconds. Now, to keep you guys updated, we know that the weather is now clear. You're like, all right, that's some good news, right? Well, we have also learned that the launch team is looking into an issue with our ground support equipment at the pad. So we wanted to give you an update on that. And of course, we're going to keep monitoring everything happening around NG2.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when you look at a rocket, you're like, oh, the rocket's going to go. There is a lot of engineering that also goes into the ground systems. That's
Absolutely.
the ground system of the pad. That is the ground systems for the telemetry and the communications. We need to be tracking the vehicle. But like out there on the pad, that pad actually is a feat of engineering in its own right. In fact, this Launch Complex 36, we were talking about it earlier in the webcast, it's been used as a launch complex for decades before us. But we
Great history.
Great history, but we basically cleared it out and built it back up again. The amount of power, data, propellants, all these lines that are going up there, you see the two towers, the one on the right will eventually have crew coming off of it. Slightly off the shot to the left, we've got the water tower. There you got a kind of a back out view so you can see a little bit more. There's a lot that goes on out there. We've got this huge, what we call our propellant farm. There's a lot that goes on out there. So we need that to also be working and working properly and in right conditions to keep the rocket ready to go as it ticks down. And then when we will turn, obviously, the show, if you will, over to the rocket. But in the meantime, there's a lot of work happening in the ground system. So if something is out of line, pressure, data, power, that then could translate down the line,
Right.
Down the pipes, literally, to the rocket, we have to check it out. So our team is on it. But we do have a little bit of time here to do so. But it looks like the weather might be clearing up. You live here in Florida. This is wild. How do you put up with this?
10 minutes. It just keeps on a constant rotation. But I will say, you know, it is great to see NG2 on the pad, ready to go. You know what they say, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen out there. And so right now, I'm going to toss it back over. Again, you are watching the webcast of NG2. We're at L-minus 26 minutes before this historic launch. Well, if you take a look on your screen, we're at L-minus just under 24 minutes. And Ariane, you and I have the distinct pleasure of being joined today by our very own Eddie Seyfert. And Eddie is one of my favorite people to talk to about engines. Eddie knows all things engines, as do you.
Eddie.
Engines with Eddie. We're coming to you. Let's talk a little bit about our engines.
Hey Tabitha, hey Ariane, thank you for the opportunity to talk about our rocket engines, the liquid propulsion systems that for me are one of the highlights of today's show. So our BE4 engines, which are manufactured in Kent, Washington and in Huntsville, Alabama, they're tested at Launch Site 1 at our BE4 engine test stand, as well as at the historic 4670 test stand. Now, I'm a former test guy, and these BE4 engines are a medium performing variant of a high performance architecture, and the teams that test these rocket engines are just eking out more and more and more thrust, better ISP for these engines that serves our customers. So like for example, this year we delivered our 30th BE4 engine to our customer United Launch Alliance, and in the building that was behind me when this webcast started, we have multiple shipsets worth of BE4 engines for New Glenn.
Eddie, do you feel like you have a particular love for one or the other, the BE4 or the BE3? I know you were out in West Texas for a long time. We do a testing of all of our engines really there, but do you have a favorite?
Well, no, it's impossible to have a favorite, right? They're all great engines. For example,
you can't say you love one of your babies more than the other, huh, Eddie?
No. Well, they're all great engines, right? BE3U, which runs on liquid oxygen, liquid hydrogen, is an open expander cycle, right? Those two molecules come together and they create a lot of energy and steam. And you know, BE3U originally started from the BE3 engine that now has flown 36 successful times on New Shepard, but they baselined it at 160,000 pounds of thrust. When it first flew earlier this year in January, it flew at 174,000 pounds of thrust. And this team is kicking butt. They keep increasing those thrust levels, keeping the performance high, and really it's all about the upper stage when it comes to the payload.
And you see they're actually on the shot, we've got the two nozzles in the second stage of the BE-3U.
Oh, wow.
Those are huge
Cool.
nozzles. Eddie, do you want to talk about why those nozzles are so large on the BE-3Us? Why do we have to have such massive nozzles?
Right, so in the vacuum of space, these nozzles don't have the atmosphere to push back in them and crumple them when the exhaust is being exhausted at supersonic, so faster than the speed of sound velocities. And that extra nozzle just gives you more momentum and higher specific impulse, right? 30 to 40 seconds more specific impulse, right? The analogy I like to use is if I had a big red balloon here in front of me, it would have pressure inside of it as a chamber, like a pressure vessel, and I would be holding it by its nozzle. It's a very technical term. And if I let it go, the big red balloon would essentially fly away. So I'm not saying our rocket engines are big red balloons, but it's the analogy that I like to think of.
That's a good way.
At least
Eddie,
they're blue balloons.
yeah.
They're going to be balloons, Eddie.
They don't have to be
Come on.
red. They've been big blue
Sorry,
balloons. He
big-
also, I remember,
Yeah,
I went to
that's right.
one of his. He hosts these things here at Blue Origin where we can learn more about updates with different things happening with our engines. And he was explaining essentially the shower head method and how shower head is very similar to how an engine works. But Eddie, I think it's so great to be able to talk to him anytime about engines. And we're so grateful for him. Of course, he is out with our employees, the best viewing spot to see.
Так, ну что, добрый вечер всем уважаемым зрителям. Мы наконец-то прошли нашу роковую отметку в T-20 минут, ну или, как пишут в Origin, L-20 минут. Уж не знаю, из чего они решили, что нужно выпендриться и писать с буквы L, подразумевая launch, но это их исключительно их личное дело. Мы приближаемся к окончательной отметке, когда будет дано или не дано добро на пуск, а пока можем понаблюдать за красивыми видами New Glenn, постепенно испаряющего свое топливо и лед, который на него намерз. У нас остается 19 минут до текущего L-1. И если не получится, то это последняя попытка на сегодня, и все. Потому что пусковое окно не вечное. Вы можете помнить, что New Glenn работает также на метании, как и Starship. И можете спросить, а как так получается, что New Glenn уже давно заправили, и он тут уже больше часа стоит, ждет. В отличие от Starship, который, как известно, не мог так долго ждать в заправленном состоянии. Отвечаю, все очень просто. Starship, во-первых, очень большой и очень металлический. Поэтому уже само это значительно усиливало скорость испарения охлажденного топлива. Кроме того, Starship, будучи большим, все равно требовал максимум топлива, требует. Поэтому SpaceX стараются закачивать в него максимально охлажденное топливо, то есть максимально плотное. Нет, глубокое охлаждение, по идее, тут подразумевает наоборот, потому что, по идее, наибольшая плотность... Да, все верно, при большем охлаждении. Поэтому потери для Старшипа более критические. New Glenn оперирует не с такими высокими, точнее, низкими температурами охлажденного метана, поэтому он может стерпеть большие потери выкипевшего топлива. Поэтому доступное окно после заправки у New Glenn, соответственно, выше, что идет Blue Origin на пользу с их любовью к задержкам. Сегодня погода во Флориде не очень, и должен сказать, она все еще не очень, там опять туман какой-то начинается, и это явно не от ракеты туман. Но будем надеяться, что это не помешает, а за 17 минут ничего совсем плохого не начнется, хотя говорят, там где-то рядом даже гроза идет, севернее примерно этого места.
For final configs and terminal count, GC.
GC is go pending retraction of LVHD10.
LC1.
LC1 is no go pending day of launch PDI load.
Understand you are a go pending the load. LC2.
LC2 is go.
LSO.
Go.
OSM.
Go with the exception of weather.
RC. Go. ESR.
ESR go pending LVHT and PDI.
AC.
Саша,
pending
как
LVHD
различные
retraction.
системы из центра проверки
Recovery.
подтверждают готовность.
Go.
GLI.
Go.
BMD.
Go.
GC, LC1, LC2. Perform final configurations for terminal count. Report when ready for terminal count gate checks.
LC2 copy.
Oh, this is RC and count 1.
GC copy.
Go ahead.
Пишет, что круизное
A
судно
lot of
хочет
potential
поскорее
losses
выйти в
surveillance
море.
violation with a cruise ship,
Это можно
but we're
сделать
still
только
working on
через
Coast Guard to make contact.
запретную
I'll give you
зону,
an update as soon as I have
поэтому
it.
тоже ограничивает срок, и плохая погода все ближе к площадке.
So you just heard the go pulled there. It seems like a conditional go according to the weather. So we are going to continue to our terminal count, and we're going to continue to also keep an eye on the weather. So lots of things that we are tracking at this moment in time.
I think we should note there just a second. So first of all, our launch director, Megan Lewis, that lady is a boss.
Yes.
She is fantastic. There's a lot of things to coordinate there, and you heard various...
Так, пока они там обо всякой ерунде разговаривают, я их уберу, и пока расскажу, что у нас сегодня, собственно, за полезная нагрузка. Раз уж есть вероятность, что мы полетим, надо рассказать. Полезной нагрузкой у нас являются два спутника. Называются ESCAPADE. Это спутники для изучения магнитосферы Марса. У них есть две важные задачи. Первая — это получить данные о состоянии магнитосферы Марса, чтобы ученые могли составить картину того, как быстро Марс терял или теряет свою атмосферу. И второе, для чего это нужно, для того, чтобы иметь больше данных о марсианской погоде и составлять более точные прогнозы, что будет полезно на будущее. Спутников двое. Они небольшие. Их запускают на New Glenn в большей степени для того, чтобы просто было что на нем запускать. Они как бы не достигают максимума полезной нагрузки этой ракеты, само собой. Эти спутники созданы компанией Rocket Lab, хорошо нам известной. Созданы в сотрудничестве с одним американским институтом, чье название сейчас сходу не вспомню, но спутники называются «Синий» и «Золотой» в честь фирменных цветов этого американского института. Они там рекламируют свои будущие лунные миссии, но на здоровье пусть рекламируют. Между прочим, первая лунная миссия New Glenn ожидается уже в январе следующего года. С демонстратором Blue Moon Mark 1. Но мы сейчас не за этим. Эти эскапады изначально планировалось запустить аж в октябре прошлого года и хотели их запускать на первом же пуске New Glenn. Но возникли проблемы. New Glenn задержался до весны, и из-за этого пуск перенесли на осень этого года, потому что пусковые окна для марсианских перелетов никто не отменял. И поэтому они перенеслись на второй пуск New Glenn. Что касается самой ракеты, мы к спутникам еще вернемся, я думаю, есть там про них чего сказать интересного, то относительно предыдущего полета, как говорят инженеры, ракета не сильно изменилась, потому что у них не очень много данных в итоге получилось о том, что нужно докалибровать для посадки, в силу того, что двигатели в прошлый раз не смогли для тормозного импульса запуститься, поэтому ракета не смогла даже зайти на посадку, если первая ступень, поэтому некоторые изменения там повносили, чтобы двигатели так себя не вели, но незначительные. Тем не менее, вероятность успешной посадки на этот раз у нас все-таки повышенная, поэтому будем надеяться, что если полетит, то и сядет. Садиться будет на расположенную в Атлантическом океане баржу под названием Жаклин, которая потом доставит этот ступень обратно на мыс. В остальном это такой же New Glenn, как тот, что мы видели весной в марте этого года, если я правильно помню. Та же комбинация из 7 двигателей BE4 для первой ступени и 2 вакуум-оптимизированных BE3U для второй ступени. Первая ступень работает на метане, вторая ступень работает на водороде. Пока что отчет продолжается, нас остается 10 минут до ожидаемого времени пуска. Это внушает доверие и надежду.
I certainly did. It was so great to be able to sit down and actually talk with him, and I think you guys are going to be surprised to learn just how much of this moment.
Для Origin эта миссия даже важнее, чем полет весной, потому что, да, весной мы впервые увидели, что New Glenn может летать, но сейчас, уже совершив первый полет, Origin должны показать, что они лучше, чем SpaceX, и могут оперативно начать ловить свои ступени, точнее, сажать ступени. SpaceX со Starship смогли добиться этого к пятому полету, а Origin, разрабатывая свою ракету значительно дольше, хотели чуть ли не с самого первого полета начать сажать ступени. С первого полета, естественно, не получилось. Потому что с первого полета мало что получается. Поэтому им очень важно как можно скорее перейти к многоразовому использованию в первой ступени, чтобы огромный и дорогой New Glenn мог быть более-менее оправдан на коммерческом рынке. Конечно, их сейчас большая часть пусков будет дальше их же собственными спутниками для амазоновского Койпера, но тем не менее. Некоторые европейские заказы на спутники типа Viasat там тоже есть. И одновременно это является важной имиджевой миссией, потому что это не просто какие-то там старлинки или макеты стрельков, это же целая насовская научная миссия на Марс. И с таким Origin точно не хочет иметь никаких проблем. Даже если это не будет касаться непосредственно полезной нагрузки. Ну уж тем более, не дай бог, полезной нагрузки. Я знаю, что тихий звук качал его слушать, так как будто он что-то интересное рассказывает. Я тут интересное рассказываю. Рассказывают, что их авионика сначала летала на New Shepard, и они учились на New Shepard'ах летать и возвращать ступени, и применяют полученный опыт на New Glenn'ах.
What is your message to those who are going to be watching our webcast and be watching MG2 take to the skies?
Well, I think everybody will be a little bit on pins and needles, I'm sure. But I would say that this is a culmination of a lot of work from a lot of teams. It's not the end point of our journey. Obviously, we have a lot more rockets to make and a lot more customers to make happy as we move forward. But to the extent we're successful here, I hope everybody at Team Blue takes a pause, smiles a bit, celebrates, because it'll be a great achievement for us. And we'll take that deep breath. We'll
Круизное судно
sort of embrace the
развернули.
moment,
Хорошо,
and
оно
then
нам
move on,
мешать
'cause
не
we
будет.
have a lot of customers waiting for us to
Остается 7 минут отсчета.
and there's nothing that makes you happier in business and in your life when you see the smile on customers' faces.
Did you ever think that you would be doing something like this in your career when you're watching your rockets launch? No?
No, not in a million years. I was very happy making Fire TVs and Echoes, but it is a boyhood dream, and so to be able to have it, I kind of pinch myself every day and just amazed that I get to wake up and help this and lead this amazing team of people build incredible technology like New Glenn.
I mean, and a reference to that, one of the first things they ask you when you come onto Blue Origin is, what is your first memory of space? What is your first memory of space?
Yeah, I have a lot of pictures. It turned out my 3rd, 4th, and 5th birthday, I have these old Polaroids of the cake, and they all have rockets on it. I was enamored with rockets as a kid, and never took the path where I thought I'd be running a rocket or a rocket company, but it turns out that it was very early in my life that I had a lot of love for it.
And we're so grateful to have you here at the helm. Dave, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And it was such a great interview to have a moment to sit down with our CEO and talk with him. If you are just tuning in, this is the launch of NG2. We are at L minus under 6 minutes, and we have to tell you guys, right now we are tracking a cruise ship that is in the area and closely tracking weather, as we heard in the Go poll. But my understanding is that by the time it comes to our moment of launch, the cruise ship should be out of the way. But we're still keeping our eyes on that weather, Ariane.
Absolutely. But with that, we're under 6 minutes to go. Let's go out to Eddie, because you realize we're about 5 minutes to go from the launch. Eddie, how's everybody feeling out there?
Небольшой совет компанию на будущее. Пожалуйста, не берите для комментирования космических пусков ведущего по имени Ариан, чтобы никто не путал ее с ракетой. Я только сейчас понял, что это ее имя.
Yeah, we got Rooster, and the flag, everybody's ahead, Rooster! An Escapade, and this is the team that's launching the rocket today. They helped build it.
Amazing. They are absolutely psyched. What we're waiting for here is a go, no go, final go, no go. We're bringing this down to the minute on this one. We want to launch before our window, so we're waiting on the team to determine if that's the way to go.
Oh, Eddie, let's go blue. Let's go blue. Thank you so much. We are hyped. They are hyped. Since we are at essentially L minus 4 minutes, let's go ahead and toss it back over to the rocket right now.
Так, пауза в ожидании последнего, как это называется, последнего разрешения. Ждем. Это самая последняя пауза, которую мне все могут сегодня позволить. Пусковое окно истекает. Боже, круизный корабль, давай уплывай ты из зоны. Мы тут 1,5 часа чего ради сидели, ждали. Круизный корабль называется Порт Канаверал, если кому-то интересно. Или он вышел из Порт Канаверал, называется Карнавал, не понял. А, это он вышел из Порт Канаверал, называется Карнавал. Окей. От этого ситуация не лучше. понимаю какие-то маленькие частные лодочки, но большой это круизный корабль. Наверняка ж капитан команды и все прочие должны быть предупреждены, что вот сегодня с такого-то по такое-то вот тут плавать не положено. Сложно было подождать с выходом в море пару минут. Для кого вообще, извините меня, вводятся эти запретные зоны, если круизный корабль взял и выперся в запретную зону, потому что так захотел? Так, Origin со стрима убрали свой таймер. Это плохой знак. Кажется, все. Они просто холд вообще таймер убрали. Это мой таймер, если что. Вот я могу показать, что они свой таймер скрыли. Я тоже могу так сделать. Все, Origin подтвердили, что сегодня пуска не будет. К сожалению, пусковое окно истекло. Но, извините. Мы сделали все, что могли, сколь бы мало от нас не зависело. Следующая попытка будет во вторник в это же время. Ну, в смысле, в исходное время, когда мы ожидали. То есть 22:40 во вторник.